Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, October 10th, 2025, and our dear friends, Colonel Wilkerson and Larry Johnson, join us today. Welcome back.
We're here with the shirt offensive.
Yeah. Well, this is so much color. I'm blinded.
Yeah, grab your sunglasses.
Yeah. Someone's not happy, Larry, today. You can imagine who's that guy. He didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, and he somehow.
Oh my God! He stopped. What was it? 15 wars? Was it 20? I lost count.
Hmm.
My favorite was that he stopped that war between Azerbaijan and Albania. Of course, he got credit for creating the country of Azerbaijan. So, all right, sorry.
Yeah.
He did.
But
He did get some compensation. They gave a prize to the woman in Venezuela who's probably one of the most formidable oppositionists, if you will. So they gave him that kind of, notice.
yeah. And let me ask the question here. I'm going to start with you, Larry. Maria Corina Machado, as they call it in Spanish, we call it Machado here in Brazil,
Machado.
by the
Yeah,
way. But
Machado.
what has she done so far that she deserves to be, to win this award? And the whole situation, Larry, in my opinion, with Venezuela is much more complex, is much more,
Yep.
and in my opinion, is related to what's going on between the United States and Russia and China. Totally connected with that. Go ahead, your take on that.
I never heard of her. I mean, this is the first I've heard of her name. Sorry. So it's not like she's got some great accomplishments out there where she's been in the news. I mean, I'm puzzled by it. I guess she's known in some circles, so excuse my ignorance.
Yeah. Here is what she said, Colonel, on Israeli media.
Corina Machado, gracias. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, and we'll stay in touch. And I promise one day we'll have a close relationship between Venezuela and Israel. And I believe, and I can announce this, that our government will move our Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. That will be part of our support to the state of Israel.
Wow, in God's will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
There we go.
She just told you who she was.
Yeah.
Nima, I heard a little bit about her when I did some research on why a president put Juan Guaido in the gallery in the Congress and recognize him. And I was trying to find out from some of my Colombian friends whom I'd met during the time we were implementing the $750 million to Colombia for Plan Colombia, both in the military and they're out of the ministries now. And I asked them questions, and it turned out to be not a lot of knowledge on their part, but the knowledge they did have was, Juan Guaido had a following of maybe 5% of the Venezuelan people, unlike what we were saying. And they didn't like him at all because there was some tension, there's always tension, between Venezuela and Colombia about migration back and forth and other problems they were having on their border. And all I could find out about her was that she had even lesser of a following. But then fast forward to what Larry and I have been finding out about Gary Bernson and this Israeli who is allied with him in feeding intelligence to the White House about Maduro and about Nicaragua. And I think you see that there is this connection there. And she just vouchsafed it right there on the screen. She is an Israeli agent at worst and an Israeli aficionado at best.
Yeah. You're muted.
Muted.
Yeah. How do you find, Larry, the peace plan of Donald Trump? The first step is going on, and they have decided to sign the deal. Israel is attacking. Israel was bombing Gaza in the aftermath of the signature of this signing document. And I think it's so important to understand what is going on in the Trump administration, and what is the reality for the United States today, considering the case of the Middle East. Here is this table shows how the United States spent, the aid to Israel and the aid to the Middle East, the operations against Iran, Yemen, and the wider Middle East. It goes to $31 to $33 billion. And they have spent since October the 7th, 2023. I think those people in Washington are thinking, so what was the achievement of what we've done so far?
Well, to quote Yogi Berra, this is deja vu all over again. People are forgetting, apparently, that they had a ceasefire that started on June 15th, 5 days before Trump went into office. He took credit for it. And that lasted until like the first week of March. And in that we had hostage exchange, prisoner exchange, everybody was celebrating. Now, the difference this go round is there is a lot more international support. And so you've got countries, a number of Arab Muslim countries talking about they're willing to commit putting troops into Gaza. But ultimately, this is all political show. It doesn't solve the fundamental issue of the Zionist genocide against the Palestinians. Because while they may be withdrawing troops from Rafah, they're attacking settlers in the West Bank as we sit here and talk. They're killing settlers the settlers are killing Palestinians and stealing their property from them now. They're doing that on a daily basis with the support of the Israeli army. So, pop the champagne cork. Oh, we got peace in our time. The thing nobody's given a good answer on is, we're going to disarm Hamas. Good luck with that. Yeah. Israel's been trying for 2 years. How did that work out? They were unable to. And some say, well, Israel they prevailed over Hamas. They had every damn advantage a military could have in a combat situation. They had the enemy, we'll call the Palestinian the enemy. They had the enemy confined to a specific geographic space. They controlled the entry and access to that point. They had tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, complete control of the air that they could bomb at will. They could also use rotary wing helicopters because they didn't have to worry too much about surface-to-air missiles. They're fighting a group that basically had rifles and RPGs, maybe a couple of heavy machine guns, but they were not well armed and well equipped in comparison to the Israelis. And the Israelis utterly failed to vanquish them. Remember, they're just pulling out of the Israelis now are pulling out of Gaza City, and they launched that offensive 4 weeks ago with we're going to wipe out Hamas. It didn't happen. So this is some political theater, and the intentions of the Trump administration are certainly not aligned with those of the Palestinian people. And I would argue not necessarily aligned with that of what the Egyptians envisioned. I mean, the Palestinians are still on the outs, and the rest of the world continues to ignore the Zionist oppression of the Palestinian people. That's the problem. That has not been solved. It's not going away.
Yeah. Nima, I would just add, I agree with everything Larry said, and I would just add that I don't think it's in line with Netanyahu's plans either. What I'm hearing is that the IDF, as Larry has just indicated, has been handed its rear end, especially in this last effort in the Gaza City area. They're running out of a lot of critical things that we simply don't have to give them and that they can't find elsewhere, or they're finding on a limited basis elsewhere. So he's actually having to recoup a little bit and get ready for the war he wants to wage on Iran. And that means he needs a lot more of the kinds of things that he's going to drop on Iran. And he also needs a respite. So this is not in line with what Trump's plans are either. Trump is going to be handed the violation of this ceasefire. Bibi's never met a ceasefire he kept for very long. And he's going to be handed it as they assault Iran. And what's he going to do then? He's going to have no choice, given his previous remarks and his previous commitment to Israel, but to go in with him. And that's what Bibi Netanyahu is counting on. All of this will be obviated entirely when he launches this attack on Iran.
Larry, Netanyahu called Putin and he said to Putin that they don't want to attack Iran. Do you feel that he's honest in the way that he's trying to express the policy of Israel, or they're trying to make some sort of calmness in Iran? Because they did that. The Trump administration did that before the first Israeli attack on Iran.
If that's true, if that report is true, it's a sign that Netanyahu's not completely insane, and that maybe he has he's in touch with some degree of reality. I'm on a chat group that's got a number of Zionists on it, and one of these guys was writing last night about Iran has collapsed and this isn't Israel's doing, and it's like I had to write back and say, you don't even know what you're talking about. I said it's just the opposite. Iran's not collapsed. Iran is rebuilding with significant support from Russia and China. And instead of growing dissidents within Iran, you've got growing unity as a result of those attacks by Israel and the United States. So what's interesting to me is that Putin is trying to play a constructive role. Not that he would play a destructive role, but he is trying to insert himself here to see if he can keep this thing from flaming up. Because I think he recognized the last thing the Russia needs is to be fighting another front war, which certainly would happen if Israel decided to launch nuclear weapons at Iran. I mean, that'd be, take this to a whole nother level. So I think, I think Putin's interventions with Bibi, Bibi's going to pay some attention to him. He's not going to, just, time to go pound sand, leave me alone.
Colonel Netanyahu, I cannot imagine Netanyahu, being not attacking any country in the Middle East, because after all, can Israel survive without attacking other countries, in your opinion, with the current situation they're in? I'm talking about basically Netanyahu and his administration.
Netanyahu went back to Israel and he said to Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others like them, don't worry. This is all in Hebrew, of course, in closed words. Don't worry. I'm not going to keep this deal. And when we go to war with Iran, it'll all be totally nullified. And the United States will be with us. And we will rid ourselves of our last enemy. And then we will be able to do whatever we want to do with the damn Palestinians. That's what he said to them. I can almost tell you I was in the room. I wasn't, of course, but that's what he said to them, to keep everything together for the moment and until the real crush comes. Now, if Putin said something to Netanyahu that I haven't heard about, and if Netanyahu believed that, and it was a deterrent towards his doing this, that could be another stick in the pile, if you will, that would keep him from going wholeheartedly into doing this. But I don't think he has any other way to survive. And you can see the strategic avenue through which he survives. That's going to war with Iran, losing that war, or just, acting like he is. I don't think he's going to have to act, and bringing the United States in. That changes everything. And the dimension, as Larry just mentioned, that scares me is that it might change things to where it's so dire for both countries at that point that Netanyahu feels he has to use a nuclear weapon, and we go along with it.
Larry, nuclear weapons are, in my opinion, one of the worst things that can happen to the Middle East, because everything has happened so far in the Middle East: war, atrocities, genocide, and the ultimate, catastrophe would be a nuclear bomb in the Middle East. Do you see the possibility of that?
Well, part of this is it's all premised on a false assumption. And that false assumption derives from the end of the Pacific War during World War II. Because the mythology in the United States is, because we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that's what brought the end to the war. So that here's a weapon that, if it's used, it can bring a definitive end to a war. Now, it's a lie. It's a pretty complex lie. The dropping of those weapons then had more to do with trying to contain, Truman's effort to try to, if you will, bully the Soviet Union, let them know, hey, we're still on top. So you then get back to the actual use of that weapon. If it was used against Iran, yeah, it could destroy and kill a lot of people. It would not make Iran would not disappear. Because if you launched a bomb that was big enough to destroy all of Iran, you would destroy the world. And fortunately, nobody has a bomb that big. But it does run it will certainly, if Israel crosses that line in bombing Iran with a nuke, Russia and China will then they will become involved in a way that this could escalate out of control. You can't rule out what countries like Pakistan would do, because Pakistan would, not that it's necessarily an ally of Iran, but it would again view this as, if Israel can bomb them, who the hell else will they bomb? I mean, because it's going to say that Israel will. It would actually, I think, put in motion international efforts that would end up destroying Israel. So, but again, people, when they get into this, the emotions of war and killing, logic sometimes goes out the window.
Yeah. Carl, here is what we had. The Hebrew media reported that the Israeli security establishment is worried that Iran is quietly but rapidly rearming, and it may act first by carrying out a preemptive strike against Israel if it feels that another military conflict is inevitable. Do you think is that assessment on the part of Israelis? Is that
who's saying that now?
It's the Hebrew media.
Okay. Let me just pick up on what Larry said. Again, I agree with what he said. We have a situation here where we could have a tactical nuke, and this truly alarms me, more so maybe even than a more grim scenario, though this one leads to an even grimmer scenario. We could have an occasion where both the United States appears to bless and Israel executes a tactical nuclear weapon or two, especially from submarine, and you get a result that shocks the world, to be sure, but it works in terms of the actual situation that Israel is trying to achieve and the United States is backing. And no one else wants to come in and augment that in any way, fashion, or form. Then we have started something, I think, that will lead down a road to utter catastrophe, because we'll try that other places and other countries will try that, seeing that there's no real opprobrium attached to it, as long as it's a smaller bomb and it's confined to a particular area. You've watched the media today leave things like that almost instantly when it loses its value of titillating people or whatever. And so we have a prospect here of actually creating a situation that marches us into inexorably a much more dangerous situation. Think for a moment of the automaticity of the mobilization plans of Russia, Germany, France, Britain in the years and months preceding the actual execution of the beginning of World War I. And then how that automaticity led to, a war no one contemplated, and a war that produced casualties untold up to that period. This is the same kind of mechanism at work, I think. And I'm hearing just too much talk in our own circles about the utility of using small yield nuclear weapons, the utility of using them even against countries that do not possess nuclear weapons. This is dangerous, extremely dangerous. We're getting ready to walk down a road that Netanyahu will have paved for us. And it's an extremely dangerous road, in my view.
Yeah. Larry, do you see the possibility of Iran carrying out a preemptive attack on Israel? Larry, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, I don't see Iran doing that at all. It would, I mean, it just, number one, it goes against the grain of their Islamic faith.
It's not in their genes.
Yeah. They don't have a history of launching preemptive strikes against anyone. That's Israel. Plus, I think if Iran were to do that, the only way they could do that would be with the full permission of China and Russia. Because were they to do it without the support of China and Russia, they would alienate those two nations, which have really gone to bat for Iran. So, yeah, that's anybody that raises that, they're just, they're trying to create another excuse to launch an attack on Iran. We got to attack them because they're going to attack us.
Israeli propaganda is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Larry, did you see this tweet of Laura Loomer, one of the pro-Israeli influencers on X? She is connecting the case of Charlie Kirk to China. It says China is behind some sort of groups that are related to the investigation done by FBI. And isn't that strange, Larry, the case of Charlie Kirk? As time goes by, it seems that many things. Why do they need to bring China in for the case of Charlie Kirk?
Because Israel's on the Zionists are in trouble. Candace Owens released irrefutable proof, and it was confirmed by the spokesman for Turning Point USA that 2 days before he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk said, "We're done with being pro-Israel," because the Turning Point USA movement, the young people joining that, are sick and tired of this continued genuflection before the throne of the Zionists. And the night before he was killed, there was a conversation. We don't know the actual substance of it, between this one Zionist reporter named Josh Hammer and then this rabbi that was sort of the Mossad handler for Charlie Kirk. Now, those two cats claim, it was just Charlie was seeking our advice on how to debate, what debating points to raise and with students to defend the Zionists. That's a load of horse manure, okay? Because Charlie Kirk was quite adept on his own being able to argue certain cases. What's really disturbing is that night at about 9:10, Josh Hammer released a tweet that Donald Trump had put out several years ago, talking about the need for a public execution. And just coincidentally, the next day, Charlie Kirk is publicly executed. So this effort by Loomer the Zionists are out of they've overstepped. Because I think a growing number of Americans is sick and tired of that nasty little country dictating what our policy is going to be. But it's not, you got Christians, evangelical Christians jumping on the Zionist bandwagon along with the Jews that claim to be Zionists. And, as people like Jeffrey Sachs have pointed out, and Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, they're tired of being conflated, having their Jewishness being conflated as making them Zionists. They don't want any part of it. So no, the fact that they're weighing in someone like Loomer trying to bring China, that is, if it was not so horrific, it'd be laughable. But I don't think there's anything funny about murdering somebody. Personally, what do I believe? I believe the Zionists were up to their eyeballs in it, taking out Charlie. Personally,
yeah,
that's what I believe.
Colonel, yesterday I talked with Richard Wolff. What he brought in is, I think it's so much important to be considered. He said that there is some sort of division within the Jewish community between the Jewish people and the Zionist people. The Zionist people are a fraction of the Jewish community. They're not that much, but their voice was dominant, But he sees that the tide is changing, that, the situation is changing. Those people, those Zionists, are not that much powerful as they were before, because of the public opinion is changing in the West and the AIPAC and the Zionists. They cannot do anything about it. Looking at what has happened in Germany, looking at the poll, 3 out of 5 voters in Germany believe what has happened in Gaza is a genocide. And looking at the polls in the United States, here is what CNN reported.
War caused a historic shift in public opinion on how Americans view the Middle East conflict. What are we talking about here? Who voters sympathize more with, the Israelis or the Palestinians? Back in October of 2023, it was the Israelis by 48 points. Look at this shift. Now we're talking about the Palestinians by a point. I looked back at every single poll that I could possibly find since this question was first asked in the 1980s. This is the first time ever in which the Palestinians had any sort of lead on this particular question. It is very clear that this war caused a historic shift away from the Israeli position in the Middle East conflict and towards the Palestinians when it comes to who Americans and voters sympathize with. This, of course, was led by Democrats, because what are we talking about? We went from Democrats favoring the Israelis by 26 points to the Palestinians by 46 points. That is a shift, John, quick math in my head, of over 70 percentage points. But overall, the first time ever in which more Americans sympathize with the Palestinians over the Israelis. Truly a historic shift.
You're muted now.
You're muted.
Yeah, I don't see that Israel can ignore the realities of what is happening, and everybody's watching what's going on.
No, they're not going to. And that might be, I'm just reaching into my bag here, that might be a deterrent, ultimately a successful deterrent to Netanyahu expanding the war. And going to war with Iran. I'm not confident it is, because Netanyahu has shown that he's not deterred by such things. Let me make an apology to your listeners here first. I got Candace's last name wrong. I called her Young on your.
Yeah.
I used to know a girl named Candy Young, and I also said talking points. I think it's turning points.
Turning point.
Yeah, I can't keep up with my own language. So I apologize to your readers for that. But I think Candace has done irreparable damage to Israel. She has. And the crowd around her that's been, everyone from Megyn Kelly over to whomever that's speaking out, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others. I watched Johnson try to put Marjorie Taylor Greene in her place with regard to the budget imbroglio. He didn't do a very good job, that smarmy, son of a gun who's our speaker. But they're angry with these people in the Republican Party, my party, because they are seeing through. And the young people in particular are seeing through, as Larry said. and as that man just indicated in terms of the polling. And let me tell you something else that's happening. I went back to some conversations I had with two rabbis in New York City. Both of them, well, one of them is a Reformed congregation, and the other is more or less an Orthodox congregation. At the time I was speaking to both, there was a real schism in what I sensed in the congregation as I spoke and got questions. The Reformed was very much concerned with where Israel was headed. The Orthodox was sort of, you're not really telling us the truth. You're lying to us, because what's happening, we can see plainly, and it's Israel is triumphing and so forth. That's changed completely now. And you've got people who are saying to me the greatest cause of anti-Semitism in the world right now, which scares us to death, even in the United States, where we have a huge population that's very successful, thank you very much, and we don't want anti-Semitism to grow. And Netanyahu is the greatest cause for that anti-Semitism. And they're worried. They're very concerned. So I think it's fair to say there is a sizable majority of Jewish Americans who don't like what Israel's doing and don't like what it's doing to them and their place in their very comfortable country. And that's going to add to the momentum to push us away from Israel.
Yeah. Larry, do you think those people who have left Israel during the conflict in the Middle East would somehow influence the public opinion? Because if they leave Israel, the population that is still there, are they mostly in favor of the government? Are they going to be mostly oriented to the sort of, policies of Netanyahu and his administration? Or we are going to have still the same case that doesn't, change the reality of Israel that much?
Let's separate out Netanyahu from what the public opinion is with respect to the Palestinians. Netanyahu is, I think, a pretty unpopular figure generally. But the vast majority of those Israelis that remain in country are ardent Zionists and do not want to coexist with the Palestinians. They do not believe in a Palestinian state. They want to exterminate the Palestinians. They're down with it. That's okay. That's good. Let's get rid of them. So, that's why I say, coming back to what we started at the outset with respect to the peace plan. To stop the fighting in Gaza is simply going to temporarily put an end to the starvation of the Palestinian people who are there, the murdering of the women and children. I think it's going to be a temporary lull. But at the same time as that's happening, the Israelis continue their offensive to steal the land from the Palestinians. It's their land. They're attacking them. They're destroying their olive groves. And the rest of the world sits back and says nothing. And so Israel's going to continue to do that until at some point, that group of Palestinians are going to rise up and they're going to start attacking. And then we'll hear more about, Hamas, they're just a bunch of terrorists. When people fight to try to defend their land, that is something historically, we Americans took great pride in it as long as it wasn't us stealing the land from the Indians. Then when the American Indians fought back, that was bad. So, this is always in the eye of the beholder.
Carl, what is the role of Jared Kushner in the talks, in what's going on with the peace plan?
Yeah.
Money. That's all Jared Kushner's interested in, just like his dad. Incidentally, one of the rabbis that I was referring to, I won't mention any names here, knew his father really well. He once offered the rabbi, I think, $100,000 to influence his synagogue, and the rabbi wouldn't take the money, and then told me why he wouldn't take the money. And he knew Jared Kushner's father very well. I think the apple didn't fall very far from the tree with Jared. He's interested in money. And whatever produces money, he's for, and whatever detracts from his money, he's against. On another angle here that Larry sort of suggested to me when he was answering your question there, I think we're looking at probably 1.5 million Jewish citizens of the state of Israel having left. Now, these were the people who had money. These were the people who you might say, compose the upper echelons of the Israeli citizenry, which is vastly inferior. I could say almost vastly, it's such a small place, to the other people in Israel now, the other 7.5 million who are Palestinian Arab, Palestinian Christian, or other type of Israeli than Jewish. So you have that majority kind of building, but they're cowed. They're cowed. Even the members of the Knesset that come from that part of the community are cowed. They know if they open their mouth about anything, they'll get kicked out of the Knesset, or some law will be created to kick them out. So you have a building situation inside Israel proper right now that shows less Jews who are, shall we say, maybe somewhat sympathetic to the Palestinian situation, or at least in a humanitarian way don't like what's happening. That's part of the reason they left. And then you have the people who left simply because they weren't secure. And that's going to increase, I think, as long as the situation keeps going on. And as I said, I don't think it's going to stop. I don't think it's going to stop because Netanyahu wants to get rid of the Palestinians, period. West Bank, wherever. And he wants part of Lebanon, he wants part of Syria, and God knows what else he wants. So this is going to continue until Israel has bled its Jewish component down to nothing but a few of the Russians who are hardcore and a few others, maybe no more than 2 or 3 million. And it's going to find my prophecy many years ago coming true in ways that I never envisioned. They're going to disappear. They're certainly going to disappear as a Jewish state. So that's another motivation, provocation, call it what you will, for Netanyahu to widen and deepen this war and to get it to some point where it has a denouement that is positive in his mind. And I don't see many ways to do that except by extending the war to Iran and bringing the United States in. And Trump has sort of put his foot down on that in a way that was kind of weird the other day when he suggested that American troops were going to be involved. He not only thanked the military for their participation in the talks, as it were, which I thought was his attempt simply to regain some ground with the military, ground he lost at Quantico big time. But I think there is a military component, a U.S. military component in this deal. It's small right now, I'm hearing, but it is nonetheless there. What the hell does that mean? That we're going to put troops on the ground in Israel, in Gaza, or wherever? Is it just to make sure that Netanyahu stays with the ceasefire, or is it something more insidious? I don't know. But this is looking like it's going to have some new ingredients in it over the next 30 to 45 days. But I still think we're going to war with Iran.
Larry, did you watch what Matt Gaetz said about the Israeli lobby in the United States? One of the podcasts he was invited on, and he was talking about the Israeli lobby. Here is what Matt Gaetz said.
I resented the fact that there was no appreciation for nuance. Like if you asked any questions about any decision of the Israeli government in any place regarding settlements, regarding Gaza, whatever, you were like, you had deviated from the script. And I just, in any policy area, I had resentment over that. And then I saw the way the AIPAC worked, and that was weird for like a country lawyer like me. I remember my first AIPAC reception, and like your fundraiser tells you have to go, and your chief of staff tells you have to go, your committee chairman all tell you have to go, and you get there and you wear this name badge, and I remember there's a QR code on it. And what we were supposed to do was go talk to donors, and then if they liked you, they scanned your QR code to make a donation, like on the spot. And so this, can you just imagine how demoralizing that is to like be told that your job for the next several hours to go chat people up, hoping they would scan you like a can of tomato soup on the way out of the meeting.
I mean, it's like literally purchasing.
Right. And
Man, I had
That is amazing.
hadn't heard that, but gee, I'm not shocked. You know,
Yeah, it's how can you imagine these people gonna put America first?
I mean, look, that's the problem Trump has, and maybe part of what's motivating Trump and to what appears to be a bit of a pivot, but I don't, put a lot of stock in it that it's permanent. Is his America First message was a major component of his base, the MAGA base. And now what they're seeing is America takes a back seat to Israel. It's Israel first. And they're saying, no, we're not having any of that. And, Tucker Carlson's been very outspoken about it. Steve Bannon is being outspoken about it. Marjorie Taylor Greene is being outspoken about it. So, it's starting to spread among the base. And yeah, there are those other politicians like Mike Johnson who are bought and paid for by the Israelis that are going to resist that. But there is a sea change underway in the United States, and I think let's call them the thinking Zionists recognize that it's a real danger to their ability to control the narrative in this country.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely true. And I found out something the other day, I think serendipitously. I did an On Point Boston interview. I hadn't been on Point Boston in a long, long time. And I got some emails and some phone calls even afterwards. And it's only anecdotal, but I think it's accurate anecdotes in terms of a general situation. I found the NPR audience doesn't know what we talk about all the time on these podcasts, whether it's Judge Napolitano, Dialogue Works, Danny Haiphong, whatever it might be. They don't look at those things. So they were stunned at some of the things that I said on her show. Some of the truths, as far as I'm concerned, I revealed on her show. So that's happening now, too. I think we're getting some cross-pollination between what is fundamentally a Democratic audience, Trump's right about that, NPR, and what is a eclectic audience on alternative media like yours. And that's feeding the other, it's going back and forth, cross-pollinating, and I think we're going to get a even bigger groundswell of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Those stats you showed, I think they came from the Cost of War Project at Brown University, one of the feed-in analysts. The money that they showed that we have spent on Yemen, the attack on Iran, and Israel is getting out there to American taxpayers. And they're beginning to understand what we're doing. And as Larry said, this is supposed to be about make America great again. This is supposed to be about focusing on the homeland, not just with troops in Chicago and Portland, Oregon, but with an emphasis on the American people. It's anything but. All this money going over there, all this money going to Ukraine. This is seeping through to the cognition of the average American now, Republican or Democrat or independent.
Larry, I started this podcast asking you if what's going on in Venezuela is connected to the conflict in Ukraine. In my opinion, there are many reasons to this case be considered. Here is what Scott Bessent said about the conflict with Russia.
We're doing a lot on Russia, but the real culprits here have been China and India in terms of buying Russian oil. They are keeping the Russian war machine going, and we put a 25% Russian oil tariff on India, and I think soon we're going to see a rebalancing where they're buying less Russian oil, more American oil, and if we were to do the same thing on China, I think the war would end quickly, but we need our NATO or European allies to join us. its sources and uses, and the source of the Russian money is this oil, and China's the leading buyer of it.
One of the main reasons, Larry, is that the United States oil is not affordable for those countries. And how can they replace that? How can they make it affordable? It's going to be it can come from Venezuela. It can come from Venezuela and goes to Europe, go to India, go to China.
Tell me how we make this is a fundamental question. Maybe I'm just ignorant. How do we make Russian oil more expensive to? That's insane.
Yeah. So here's Besant, who, I know somebody who's friends with him, and she's always described, oh, he's a really smart guy. That was one of the greatest examples of dumb assery I've ever witnessed. Number one, if you reduce the supply of oil coming out of Russia, you reduce global supply. Now, even in Introduction to Economics, you're taught if you reduce the supply of something, the price of it goes up, not down. Number two, India is paying for Russian oil with Chinese yuan. They're not using the damn dollars.
Exactly.
Besant, wake the hell up. This isn't just about apart from the fact that he's got his facts about the criticality of Russian oil exports to their economy. The oil exports, all oil exports, account for about 15% of Russian gross domestic product. Yes, it's an important part, but it's not crippling. It's not going to stop the war.
Yeah.
And if they think that this is that Russia's just doing this for economics, again, what an ignorant ass this man is. I mean, it outrages me to see somebody who's in a position with that kind of responsibility exhibit such a level of stupidity. I mean, good God. Understand why Russia is fighting. And if you don't understand why Russia is fighting, then you come up with all this harebrained crap. Oh man, if China and India just stop buying their oil, the war will end. Pull your head out of that deep, dark hole where you have it stuck.
I think they're paid to not understand what's the position of Russia is. The only reason that what else would be the reason? They know what is the position of Russia, but they don't care about this.
Is that for me or Colonel?
Colonel.
Ask it again, please.
The question is, Larry said that they don't understand it. I think they understand the whole situation with Russia. It was so simple in the way that they're expressing their main goal in Ukraine and the root causes of the conflict in Ukraine. But Besant doesn't care about what Russia is thinking of.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of that, but I also think that the propaganda has been so strong, and it is propaganda, but it's propaganda that's been very effective with regard to Russia, that they don't understand the reality of the situation. They don't understand that Putin is interested in one thing and one thing only in terms of Ukraine, and that's his own security. And that Ukraine and NATO threaten that security. Bingo, I'm doing the special military operation to eliminate that threat. They don't understand the simplicity of that because they've been so deeply involved in the duplicity in making it otherwise that they believe their own crap. And Kellogg is a perfect example of that. Perfect example. You couldn't find a person in Hollywood scripted in that role to be more perfect.
Orban says that Zelensky and his administration is trying to overthrow his government in Hungary, Larry. How Zelensky got so much powerful that they can go against Orban and his administration in Hungary. Is that Zelensky or is that MI6 or something? The British government is doing this.
Well, what you have among the NATO elite is a growing panic. Because Russia is the campaign is accelerating, not decelerating. even though the Rasputitsa, the rainy season has now come into, the rain is falling and turning fields into mud and making somewhat impassable. The Russians are stepping up their attacks. Last night, they turned off the lights in Kiev. I mean, everything on the left bank of Kiev went dark. They hit Kremenchuk and Zaporizhia as well. The power plant, one had a thermal power plant, one had a hydroelectric power plant. Russia's taking those out. Russia is now the general staff, I guess, have issued orders. They're going to turn off all of the lights, all of the power in Ukraine. And there's not a damn thing Ukraine or NATO can do to stop that. That's number one. The ability of Zelensky to continue to keep the money flowing into Ukraine, that's come to an end too. So this is panic. And so when he says things like that and they lash out and flail about like a drowning person in the icy ocean, that's what you get, that kind of talk.
And on top of that, Nima, Merz is sitting on about 30% support in Germany. Macron is sitting on about 20% support in France, and Starmer is sitting on less than both in Great Britain.
Yeah, my standard line on this has been that if somebody was given a choice, an opportunity, say, hey, we're going to let you have a sit down, you get to have lunch with Merz, Macron, and Starmer, or you can have a colonoscopy, then choose the colonoscopy, okay?
Today, I'm going to have a discussion
and Nima's not laughing because he hasn't had a colonoscopy yet.
The old-fashioned way, too.
Yeah. For all the under 40 crowd out there that's never had a colonoscopy, let's just put it this way. It's not pleasant.
Yeah. Larry, today I'm going to have a discussion between Scott Ritter and John Helmer about the latest rumors about Vladimir Putin not being that strong in his sort of language toward the West and warning the West in the conflict in Ukraine. It's basically in terms of the use of Tomahawk missiles, because many people are concerned about these missiles can escalate the situation in Ukraine the way that nobody would be able to bring it back to undo the situation if that happens. What's your understanding of Russia's strategy? Do you think it's just about Vladimir Putin talking this way, or it's a grand strategy for the administration? They know what to say. They know what are the main points to be, explained to the public opinion. What is your take on that?
Yeah, Putin's president, but he's not calling the military shots. This tendency we have in the West to I call it the Hollywood model, because in Hollywood, if you go out and you try to pitch a story, you want to get a project, a film made, they always ask two questions: who's the hero and who's the villain? So we always got to have a hero and a villain. It's always about one person. There's never any recognition or appreciation of this system, the organic structure that's involved in running a government. So with respect to Russia, what has been done in Ukraine has been following a plan put together by the general staff. And we got some evidence of this earlier this year on the blog, the Substack written by Murat Karulin, one of the leading war correspondents. There's another individual that writes on that Substack with him. In March, and I credit Alexander Mercouris with pointing this out from the Duran, but in March, this person writing on Murat's Substack laid out what Russia was going to be doing over the course of like the next 6 months. And lo and behold, here we are 6 months later, and it was exactly what this guy laid out. So reflecting that it's a plan by the general staff. Putin's primary job, is to manage relations with other countries, not to get Russia into a shooting war if at all possible, to avoid that. But as is the case with Ukraine, Russia was left with no choice because of the actions of NATO that they were taking with respect to Ukraine. So this notion that, Putin's in trouble because he's not being, nasty enough in public or mean enough towards the United States. He just, again, he just within the last, 6 to 7 hours over at that conference he's attending with the former Soviet states that are, all the stands, the stand conference. He reiterated, he said, look, we've got our air defense system is quite capable of dealing with this threat. We've made it very clear to the United States that if they do this, it's going to change our relationship and not in a positive way. He also said something, though, that was really interesting. He goes, we got a new weapon. We haven't announced it yet. It's still being tested, but it works. And I'm going, whoa, are we talking something about a directed energy weapon, perhaps? But Putin, he's not upset. He's not, you compare his visage, how he handles himself, with that of Zelensky. Zelensky's panicked. Zelensky looks like a rat cornered, nervous and twitchy. Putin has been quite relaxed. So this notion that, they haven't had enough Medvedev as an example, it's just, it's silly. I think Putin is responding responsibly as a leader should, but he is not a dictator. He's not the one that has to be this cult of personality about him. It's very much a collegial system that, when he puts Belarusov in a position as defense minister, hey, get this thing up and, get it cleaned up. He defers to Gerasimov on military affairs. And, mark my words on this, they've made it clear they're going to take Odessa, they're going to take Transnistria, and they're going to wind up controlling all land east of the Dnieper River. And that'll be by the end of next year.
Oh. Carol, your comment on that, on Odessa, Nikolaev.
Absolutely.
Larry, it's a bombshell, Larry.
And I want to own the whole coastline of the North Sea too, or the Black Sea, on the northern coastline. And let me just make a general comment on what Larry just said, which is bingo. We had this deal during the Cold War. We had two schools of thought. Sovietologists were what we call these people. One school was the conflict school, and one school was the utter totalitarian school. The totalitarian school believed that what Larry was discounting there was nonetheless the truth, that one man did everything. We have never had that in the Soviet Union, with the possible exception of getting close with it with Stalin. But since Stalin and Khrushchev's secret speech, even that wasn't any totalitarian school government. You had to deal with several people, if not a lot of people. And it's big time that way in Russia now. We have this conception of autocracies or autocratic-like governments. Xi Jinping is a good point in mind. Even Modi, as being focused on the Clint Eastwood, the hero. In our case, the dastardly person who's running everything. That's bull. It's absolute bull. And when you interpret a decision-making process based on that model, you're most often wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, just related to that, I encourage people to watch your interview with Pepe. I did an interview with him that's posted at Countercurrents. and the relevance is that as he traversed China across the Silk Road from east to west, 5,000 kilometers.
Larry, you're talking about your YouTube channel.
Well, I'm talking about my YouTube channel, but I'm also talking about your channel. Yeah,
Okay.
my Countercurrents is my YouTube channel.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But what he reported was the richness of China, the modernity of China, the fact that the wealth has spread out. It's not concentrated with one little group of commies.
Yeah.
That these communists they've improved the lives of the people of China across the nation, across the wide expanse of that country.
For the first time in Chinese history.
Yeah. And then, so coming back to Russia, even with Stalin, when Stalingrad was, they're battling for that, he listened to Zhukov. And in fact, some of the general staff at that time would disagree with him, and he was not the dictator that made all the calls. He ended up deferring, smartly so, ultimately to the military. He had almost sunk the Soviet Union by killing and locking up a number of generals during the purges in 1938. But he was at least smart enough to recognize, okay, I made a mistake, and he brought some of those very generals were brought back and excelled in positions in defending the motherland. So yeah, what's going on right now, this tendency to try to over personalize things about Putin's doing this and Putin's doing that. Putin is he's a symbolic face of Russia, and candidly, I can't think of a leader, going back, in history, that has played as instrumental a role in transforming a country and doing so in a way where he's not the one who's the center of attention. It wasn't an ego project for Putin, because what we've seen is that Putin has really made it about improving the lives of the Russian people. So it's just in the West, we're morons. I mean, let's admit it. We think in terms of half-hour comedy sitcoms or television dramas, and we don't like to have to actually think about the nuances of what we're witnessing. And so even today, Putin is saying, he said some positive things about Trump. They're actually quite a contrast from what the Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov was saying on Monday, in a speech to the Duma, where he was very critical. He said, "Hey, we're making zero progress since Alaska with respect to improving diplomatic relations." So Putin's still trying to keep the door open, not slamming it shut, but he's adamant about defending the rights of Russia.
If you go into deeply into Clausewitz, and I just pick him because I know more about him, Jomini or some of the other war theorists. If you go in there deeply and you look at his combined words in different parts on war about the prince, about the leader, about the person who makes all the difference in the world, and of course for Clausewitz, the ideal was Napoleon, both the prince and the warrior in the same individual. So you don't have to communicate, which is a problem sometimes, communicating between the leader and the military leader. What he talks about in terms of personality and competence and brilliance and so forth is personified today in Putin. The way the prince should act and the way the military underneath that prince should act.
Mm-hmm.
And that must be a terrible thing to even intuitively realize, in a flash realize, when you're Donald Trump or any other leader on the tapestry of the globe right now, because he's superior to them all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Larry, before wrapping up this session, here is what Putin said about the nuclear START treaty. He said that Russia maintains contact with the United States about the nuclear START treaty. If there is goodwill, we will extend it. But he admits that its prolongation is not critical for Russia. If it's not important for the Americans, it's not for us. And he wants to have to extend it to, but I don't see that coming from the United States. I don't see that Donald Trump that would be the priority of his administration.
No, it's not a priority. The good news was the other day when it was raised, Carolyn Leavitt reacted positively. Trump didn't, reacted somewhat positively. So, but there's no denying that Trump, he walked away from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement in 2018, 2019. Paved the way for Russia's deployment of the Oreshnik missile, among other things. The reality that the United States is failing to grasp is that we are so far behind Russia militarily on critical fronts. We're behind in terms of the space program. That's without dispute. We're way behind, generations behind. To quote Andrei Martyanov, with the Oreshnik missiles, with the hypersonic missiles. Oreshnik being just one example of that. The United States does not have a deployed, functional hypersonic missile, just one, whereas Russia's got at least four varieties, and whatever Putin's said that they're working on now, it's they're ready to announce it. It's just a matter of timing. In terms of actual competence of the military on the ground, the Russians have been fighting a NATO proxy force for now 3.5 years, and are prevailing over it. Whereas the United States fought in Afghanistan for 20 plus years, and we couldn't finish that one off. We couldn't stop the Houthis as a more recent example. So, this nonsense that the United States has got the greatest, the bestest military ever, it's delusional stuff. But reality is going to wake us up, and I think the wake-up call is going to come on the economic front first, and then it will that will trickle over and undercut the military side.
I would just add delusional and dangerous.
Yeah.
If you saw the report last night and this morning, on the new solar fields in Tibet that the Chinese have built at altitude, where they're 10 times more efficient, and the fields that they have of them, and know something about what China's doing with regard to the climate crisis and basically regenerative energy and safe energy. It's so far ahead of us, it's pitiful. It's absolutely pitiful how far behind we are. They may be the number one polluter still, but they are taking such positive action on such a fast and rapid scale that they will outdo us colossally within the next decade. I noticed where Elon Musk announced that, or someone announced for Tesla, that they had 2,000 more charging stations they just put up. China has 1 million charging stations. We have 17,000.
Yeah.
Actually, Pepe mentioned that, Larry, during the talk I had with him.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how China is growing, and just ignoring all these endless wars that every day we're talking about, these endless wars each and every.
And like Larry was saying, the average Chinese citizen now can get on a fast train that is wonderfully equipped and accommodated, and will wherever they want to go in China and come back in a reasonable amount of time. It's an incredibly successful country.
Yeah, when you look at how that country has changed in 30 years.
Yeah.
Now, 30 years that's not a long time.
No.
And it has been Yeah, it's been an incredible transformation. Meanwhile, we sit here in the United States convinced that we're the greatest, and yet our infrastructure's crumbling. Our political fabric is being torn apart, and we're the very foundation of a society, both particularly in terms of education, is eroding. Again, what I find interesting, and this opens up a whole nother topic that will take you off in a different direction. But we've emphasized it in the West that religion is very important to the development of the society. Well, that didn't explain China. You know, China was without any central religion. It was, as you know, I asked Pepe about this too, and he said it's a combination of just meritocracy. They wanted the best. You had to prove yourself. And then the party, the Communist Party as it exists, what the Chinese variant of it is, it turned out to be pretty results oriented. That they didn't just simply enrich the governing class like we do here in the United States. It was enriching the entire society and recognizing that was actually something smart to do. It is somewhat revolutionary. That is, if that becomes the face of communism, that's going to become a very powerful, attractive force around the world. And there will be people rejecting democracy because all democracy creates is corruption and chaos.
Yeah, and even just to add to that, my first trip was in '84. My second trip was in 2001. My third trip was in 2009. And the changes from '84 to 1 were stunning, but the changes from 1 to 9 were unbelievable. And I can imagine if I went back today, because I try to keep up with places like Shanghai and others in terms of reading about it. But it is an incredibly successful society, probably the most successful on the face of the earth. There are some things that are developing there that are maybe somewhat alarming in terms of the use of AI and body recognition. And, they know who you are the moment you breathe on them, things like that. But when you got 1.5 billion people, it's you want to keep order and you want to keep the society functioning and going forward. That's a part of it, probably. And I agree with Larry that liberal democracy might not be the best way to do this. I'm not sure what is the best way to do it, but it might not be what we call liberal democracy and what we've been exporting and weaponizing for the last 25, 30 years. It's incredible what they have done, and it's incredible what their potential to do is, and especially with the rest of the world. You hear other people all the time talking about how this base road initiative is really contaminated because they do things in the countries where it impacts that are beneficial for them and not the country. That's not what I'm seeing and not what I'm hearing. There are some problems with it, but yes, what is happening is places, and you go through Central Asia, Samarkand, Dushanbe, Tashkent, and you see what the impact is. And the idea that Erdogan has, that he's going to turn it around and flow it the other way, good luck, Mr. Erdogan, because you're going to run into a juggernaut coming your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Carl and Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
And it was made even better with Colonel Wilkerson's great shirt. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
He wins the shirt award today, I think.
Yeah. He wins. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. We'll see you later.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.